meeting with Commissioner Reed.
Good morning, all. How are you today? Good.
Good, great.
Bright-eyed and bushy tailed. I'd like to call the Real Estate and Transportation meeting to order. I see that we have a quorum. Commissioner Franklin, Commissioner Walker, myself are present, as well as Mayor Muntz and Commissioner McCauley and some of our staff. I guess everybody can hear me okay.
Yes, sir.
We have two orders of business today. One with Tom Evans Environmental in reference to 3200 Flightline, and in first one at 313 and 321 North Massachusetts. At this point, I'm not sure if it's going to be Ramona or is it going to be Mr. Palmer to take care and give us our presentation.
Ramona will.
Good morning. I'll handle the first item. That's the airport lease agreement.
Go ahead.
Okay. Thank you, sir. Good morning, everyone. The first item that we have is a first modification to the lease agreement with Tom Evans Environmental. This is a tenant that has been out of the airport since 2015 and currently leases just over 4,000 square feet of office space on the third floor of the Giroux office facility. That's at 3200 Flightline Drive. This particular tenant is seeking to extend its initial lease term for 2 additional years, which would be retroactively effective to July 1st, 2020, and it contains 2 additional 1-year options of renewal. The base rent will be $4,032 a month, which is $12 a square foot rate, or $48,384 annually, in addition to any taxes that are due, and they will also be responsible for utility costs in the amount of $600 per month, which is their proportionate share of the utilities for that portion of the office building, that the space that they're renting.
Thank you. I see that Gene Conrad has stepped up. Gene, that floor is about 25,000 square feet. Is that correct?
No, sir. The entire building is 25,000 square feet. I want to say that the third floor up there is probably about 6,000 square feet.
And who occupies the other space? Is it vacant, or who else is on that floor?
Well, no, in the other building, or in the entirety of the rest of the space, is Giroux Trucking and Logistics. There is a little space up there by Tom Evans that's unoccupied, but it's contiguous with Tom Evans' space, and it would be hard for us to lease it out. So it's just empty space at this point.
Thank you. Do any of my fellow commissioners on the committee have any questions? It appears as though not pretty straightforward lease. Will I hear a motion to move forward?
So move, Mr. Chair.
Got a motion from Commissioner Walker and a second from Commissioner Franklin. All those in favor, please raise your right hand to the screen so we can see it. It is unanimous, 3-0 vote. Our second order of business will be 313 and 321 North Massachusetts Avenue.
Thank you, Commissioner. This is an agreement for the sale and redevelopment of property, as you mentioned, at 313 and 321 North Massachusetts Avenue. This is property just north of where the old Greyhound building used to be, north of the police station. The proposed purchaser is FERC One LLC. The primary principal of that is Gregory Fancelli. This agreement is structured very similarly to the Framework Meriton agreement, and I believe Elise has a short slide presentation to outline some of the.
Elise, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Commissioner. Good morning, Mayor, Commissioner, and colleagues. If you could, Mr. Cook, just allow me to be the presenter here, and I'll share my presentation.
You have the floor, sir.
Thank you, sir. All right. Well, as the city attorney mentioned, staff has been working on this development agreement for a year now. It is very similar to the Meriton agreement. We put out this property last year in April, and we had one respondent, which was FERC. In May of last year, Commission commissioners granted us the authority to go ahead and go forward and put together this development agreement. And so this proposed project will significantly improve the connectivity downtown from the incoming Summit site up to the in-town bypass, while also adding pedestrian enhancements in the east-west blocks of the north portion of downtown to the east of Massachusetts Avenue. So this entire development really it complements the Meriton development, which is solely residential and sits to the east of the proposed project. So you can see Meriton there in the background. Just to give you an overview of the ownership of these parcels and what parcels we're looking at. It's two pieces just north of the old Greyhound site, which sits just to the north of the police station at the corner of Bay Street there. So the developer is proposing phase one, which would sit solely on CRA property. It's just over 29,000 square feet. The project is a combination of office and residential use. The phase two of the project will span across what is now the old Greyhound site, and it would mirror phase one with the same standards there. And then the final and third phase would essentially double what was built in phases 1 and 2, adding approximately 95,000 square feet of similar uses with a target to include a small grocer for downtown. So overall, when you look at the site plan here, the developer is proposing 156,000 square feet. It would span from Bay Street up to Peachtree along Massachusetts Avenue. This overall, the project would be 4 to 5 stories of mixed-use development. Within this allotment, the developer can have a 10,000 square foot deviation from what is shown. It is estimated that this project will cost $25 million, and it would generate an estimated $225,000 in taxable revenues if all phases are completed. So I'll take you through some of the specifics of the development agreement. When I refer to the master project, it'll be the entire project overall, and the developer is looking at or proposing a $200,000 purchase price specifically for the CRA-owned property. The appraised value of those lots is $94,000. There will be a $10,000 deposit, which would be applied to the purchase price at closing. We're looking at a 90-day due diligence period from the effective date with 130-day extension. Just some of the general closing conditions are the developer needs to have proof of a financial commitment. They need to have their permits in hand. One of the conditions is that FERC will have to acquire the Greyhound property to ensure that phase 2 can go forward. Closing will occur within 30 days of satisfying all these conditions, but not more than 12 months after satisfying these conditions. We do have 3 30-day extensions built into the closing period at no cost to FERC. On the incentive side, we're looking at a 50% TIF for 5 years if construction of phase 1 is completed within 18 months of closing. There is a proposed 5-year TIF extension for phase 1 of the development. So they would get an additional 5 years if the master project, the entire project, the 156,000 square feet is completed within 36 months of certificate of occupancy of phase 1. So we're trying to really incentivize the developer to go through with the entire project by providing some additional TIF funding. Of course, phases 2 and 3 would be eligible for 50% TIF over a 5-year period, provided that the term does not extend beyond the life of the downtown CRA. On the dollars perspective, CRA will provide $144,000 or approximately $4.93 per square foot in incentives back to the developer. So of the $200,000, we'll send back $144,000 in order to obtain the $25 million for the project overall. Just some of the additional terms we had to look at. FERC is seeking access to some 50 spaces or 4% of whatever is built should the city pursue a parking garage on the LPD site. And they are aware that that is something that there's no guarantee for that to go forward, but should it be constructed, they would like to have access to some of those parking spaces. They understand that they would have to lease those spaces at market rate. And the city's obligation is solely based on the completion of the entire master project. So they would have to build out the entire project in order to obtain access to those parking spaces should they become available. Just looking at a general timeline, the developer could commence construction if everything went well within 120 days or so, which would be November 1st. But there's the latest that construction would be able to occur, provided all extensions are exhausted and due diligence, and the closing conditions would be March of 2022. So there's a large window there for when construction can be completed. And so staff is recommending that we be granted the authority to go forward with this and execute the development agreement. And I'll stop for any questions you may have.
Thank you, sir. I have a few questions. Assuming they close, and then if they have a 12-month period to start construction, in the event they don't have a construction permit or their CO a building permit, will we have a right to buy it back?
So the closing condition, Commissioner, is that they have to have all these items in place, and we would not sell the property. So there's no transfer of property until all the conditions are met.
And we have about $700,000 in this property. Is that a fair statement?
I would say well over 700,000, Commissioner, if you include all the carrying costs, mowing costs, the demolition and acquisition, approximately $700,000.
Okay. Well, they're going to make a pretty big investment in that area. So
Yes, sir.
Do I hear any questions from Commissioner Walker? Please, floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Drumgo, I want to make sure, I know we were shared about this information way back in April. I believe, according to my notes, April 27th, when we had our one-on-one with Mr. Delgado and senior staff at that time, along with you. If I heard you correct, as far as what's proposed, if I hear is strictly retail and office. Am I saying that correct? Because I know that's what part of what we're talking about, our catalyst plans have been and talked about for several months now along that particular corridor, because of having the residential just east of it is proposed for it. And I want to make sure also I heard you say, because I don't recall hearing that before until just now, there's a possible grocer that may be part of this particular, hopefully, build out.
So just taking those one at a time, Commissioner, the development itself, it allows some flexibility for the developer. So what we didn't want to do is limit the developer by locking them in to specifically construct retail or office. So what we did was we essentially labeled it flex space. The intent is to have some office in a live work capacity, some retail use, but also leave open the possibility for residential use. And so when you look at the 4-story layout, you could have some ground floor retail, combination office, perhaps some live work for folks who may live in the proposed units. At maximum, I think that the development would accommodate 120 additional units should they develop the entire the upper floors as residential. So there is some flexibility for a developer to determine what's going on with the market and what's more favorable for their portfolio. And you are correct that this is very complementary to the Meriton development, which is all residential. I think that, when we look at that Massachusetts corridor, we wanted to have a mix of uses and make sure that we had some retail or commercial space along that corridor, and this will help us accomplish that.
Now, again, I'm sorry.
I'm sorry. Go ahead, Commissioner Franklin. Do you have a question? Okay. I'm sorry, Phil, go ahead.
And I'm sorry. I want to make sure I heard Mr. Drumgo mention as he explained, and I thank you for the explanation, Mr. Drumgo. But did I also hear again that there's a possibility of having a grocer coming in?
Yes,
I know when we're talking about the development as we're having in our downtown corridor with residential and hopefully additional retail and office kind of stuff. I know the talk is being, hey, would that be some kind of store, I guess, for lack of
Sure.
a word, the person
Well,
will be able to get some shopping done, that kind of thing.
Yes, sir. And it's not by any means a huge footprint. I think that what the developer is showing in the plan, it says bodega above that entrance, because that would be the concept of that feel is to get that small grocer where you're looking at less than 10,000 square feet to provide a place for folks who live in Muriton and potentially within this development to walk in and pick up a few essentials without having to get out of downtown. Same thing for those folks who will be working downtown. So while they're not locked into doing it, of course, it's their development, it's their portfolio. So they want to do what's best for for them as well. But they've been very receptive in terms of integrating that small grocer into their plans.
Thank you. Elise, can you expand a little bit more on the acquisition of the Greyhound bus station?
Sure. So the developer has to acquire the Greyhound station. That lot is sat vacant now for a couple of years. It is my understanding that they do have a commitment in hand, which has taken a while to obtain because of the Greyhound entity is, as you know, extremely large, and it's taken a lot for them to obtain the commitment to acquire that site. And so it looks like Greyhound is finally ready to let it go. There was some remediation that's occurring on the site, but just within these closing conditions, we wanted to make sure that they could obtain that property before we move forward.
The remediation has been completed. I had heard it had some hydrocarbons on the site.
Yes, sir. Well, I'm not sure if it's completed yet, but I know that the developer was basically trying to obtain it so that they said they'd finish the cleanup if necessary. So there may be some additional cleanup on site. I can confirm that with the developer, but I do know they do have that commitment to acquire that.
Do I hear any other questions from our staff? And I guess we'll address this a little bit more at the city commission meeting if our other people have any questions. Any other commissioners have a question by? It appears not. May I hear a motion from someone?
Move to approve.
And then I will second. Phil Markle the motion made by Commissioner Franklin, seconded by Commissioner Walker. All those in favor, please raise your right hand. Passed unanimously 3-0. Are there any other issues that any of us wish to discuss at this time? It appears not. It is 8:33 and we will adjourn. Thank you.
Right, well, that takes us out of the committee meeting and allows us to get started with our agenda study. So, and Commissioner McLeod, good to see you this morning, sir. We have Commissioner Madden not able to attend the agenda study due to an unforeseen tooth issue that's being remedied currently, and but she anticipates joining us for the commission meeting. Just to let you know the presence of parties. All right, so and Commissioner and Deputy City Manager Sharous will join us for this meeting and kind of guide us through this process from the city's standpoint as well. So you can see we have for Monday's meeting the call to order, the update from LAMTED, which is very, very important because, as you probably know, there's been some reduction of drivers and availability of mechanics due to the virus, and so that has had an impact on some of the reduction of some of the routes. The military order, the Purple Heart, from Commander John Hillary, will be a presentation, and then we will do our proclamation for Lakes Appreciation Month, which cannot be skipped in our city on an annual basis. We'll do the committee reports, and that brings us to the consent agenda. The items that are included are the minutes that you see there, and the utility one, and that is it. So you might want Ramona to give us a little update on C1 so that we can take a look at that, and then we can look at all items. And Commissioner Madden, you're with us. That is so impressive. but not moving her mouth much. Okay, that's okay. It comes with time. All right, Commissioner Reed.
Thank you, sir. I thought when we were doing my one-on-one that we might put number 2 in the utility department with the Gulfstream. That might be on the consent agenda as well.
We could be added if you make that recommendation. So what would that, I know we have all gone through that. Everyone's done their one-on-ones, right? Okay, nobody, okay. So it's certainly something that we could.
I so move.
Okay, so that means, Ramona, if you could discuss those 2 items, that would be great.
Sure. Good morning again. The first item that we have is the agreement with Siemens Energy. This is an upgrade of Unit 5's digital control application processors. The unit was switched over to the T3000 control system that Siemens is the original equipment manufacturer in 2010. So these application processors are in need of replacement. There's some concern regarding lack of security and being able to have the firmware updates with regard to them. This will be procured through Siemens, the existing contract we already have with Siemens. In their proposal, the total cost of the upgrade is $106,615.27. And this is included in Lakeland Electric's FY20 budget.
You're muted, Mr. Mayor.
Questions by any commissioners on that one? Let's take the second one then.
All right, the second item that we have is an agreement with Gulfstream Natural Gas for pipeline capacity to transport natural gas. We have an existing 20-year agreement, which is actually set to expire in 2022, but Tori Bombard, our fields manager, was successful in trying to negotiate an extension or an additional term for 25 years. And in exchange for that consideration, we were actually able to get a very favorable rate of 55 cents a decatherm instead of the current price of the tariff, which would go up to about 70 cents a decatherm. It is a 27, or ends up being a 27-year agreement because we have the 2 additional years remaining on that term, but it ends up in cost savings for the utility of about $1.7 million a year based on the reduction in that rate. The term of the 27-year agreement would actually be effective on October 1st, 2020 and continue. We also have the ability pursuant to this agreement, if we don't need the capacity, we can sell that capacity at that 55 cent decatherm rate as well. The total cost associated with the agreement per year is approximately just over $6 million. And this would be, the capacity cost is budgeted in Lakeland Electric's FY20 and 21 fuel budget, subject to the Commission's approval of the FY21 budget.
Large amount, and I know that we've each discussed it, but it buys us the continuing capacity at a very favorable market rate, and it is something we can sell as well if we don't use all of that capacity in what's probably a very predictable utilization in those years ahead, which is natural gas. And so you have to reserve that space. Commissioner Reed.
Thank you. Ramona, is that $6 million is basically our tolling fee? Is that a fair statement?
I'm sorry, is it a what fee?
The $6 million, our tolling fee?
That's our total fee that we would pay for capacity, but we may not reach that amount. If we determine we don't need all that capacity, we can sell it. So it would be less than that, but that would be our not to exceed per year.
Can we mark that up if we wanted to charge somebody 60 cents if they were paying 70? They have to get the 55. Okay.
Yeah, no. What we would have to do is we would sell that capacity at the same rate at the 55 cents Decatherm.
Thank you.
Spoken very entrepreneurially, though, and I'm very
Always trying to make a buck.
yes, sir. Any other questions by commissioners? How many would favor leaving that on the consent agenda? Raise your hand, please. So I think that's unanimous. All right, so we'll do that. Thank you, Commissioner Reed, for suggesting that. Is the consent agenda then fine with you as is? All right, then we leave that and go to the approval, the request for general public, which there are none, equalization hearings, and that is also city attorney matter.
Thank you. The equalization hearing is just routine assessments for lots cleaning and clearing, so nothing unusual apparently on that. And then I think the next item on the agenda is a miscellaneous item under public hearings, which is a public hearing to consider proposed expenditures under the CDBG and home programs. Andy Gibson will be making a presentation on Monday. Essentially, what this will be is specifying how much is going to be spent for public service type projects, contributions to nonprofits, as well as subsidization of youth participation in parks and recreation programs over the summer. And once again, you get a public hearing on presentation on that on Monday. I believe Teresa's here if you do have any questions for today. And if not,
Commissioner Walker has a question, Mr. Mayor.
Go ahead, Commissioner Walker.
Thank you. Not a question. I just want to make sure that I want to comment to my colleagues and all. I thought the meeting that we had with the public to discuss this particular item was well attended. Of course, the mayor was there along with myself, and because I think some particular challenge with the schedule of where the location of the meeting room normally is, it has been over the years, as you know, at the Coleman Bush building was moved to the Dream Center, just of course down the street basically. But I thought the turnout was a very good turnout that evening. Very good questions asked by different ones that were there, different agencies or individuals that were there. Not knowing what the mayor may think, but I thought it was a very well attended and very good conversation that came forth from the discussion that was held. And I think Ms. Gibson, and along with others, staffers that were there, gave I think the input that needed to be done to answer those questions that came forth. Just want to make sure you all knew that.
Yes, I totally agree. Commissioner Reed.
Teresa, what is the home project?
So there are basically two pots of federal funds that come down from HUD. One is Community Development Block Grant and the other is home. And each of those pots of money have specific eligibility requirements as well as ineligible activities. That'll be part of Annie's presentation on Monday. But for the most part, with home funds, you can utilize those for rehabilitation. And in the case of the city of Lakeland, after you amended the prior year's action plan, you can use it to facilitate new construction as well. The CDBG funds are particularly focused on public services for the most part. And so there's actually an agenda item later today where you will look at some of those public service projects that are recommended for funding.
Can we use can the city use part of that funds to rehab some of the units that we currently have?
To reuse, I'm sorry, I didn't catch the end of that.
Some of the home money for refurbishing some apartments or stuff that we may be in need of repair.
If those facilities or those buildings or projects serve income qualified residents, those funds can be used for rehabilitation, yes.
As well as our Sadowski funds that will end up being appropriated this year using CARES money to fund it. So it got swept by the state, but still exists in full, which is kind of confusing. Commissioner Walker.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Ms. Teresa, I've seen some, speaking of reference to home, I've seen construction starting now on some of the infill that we have, and especially in the I would call northern portion of our city, northeast, northwest. And I know we've approved certain things along the way. How we going? How is that coming along? Because I've seen some new construction coming into play, and I know we approved some of these things. I've seen it that's coming out of the ground. How are we doing with those?
Right. So some of the new construction you may be seeing would be projects that were funded as rehabilitation projects, but ended up having to be new builds just because of the condition of those buildings or those homes. And so those would be for individual homeowners. There's also a few homes that are being built by Keystone Challenge Fund, and also a couple of homes that are being built by a local builder contracted through our affordable housing program. As for the lots that the commission had given the city staff the ability to dispose of administratively, we have gone through a review process of proposers that had indicated they would like some of those lots. We are narrowing those the list down of those proposers, and we'll be bringing those forward to a review committee for them to finalize the selection. So we hope to begin dispersing those lots sometime within the next 2 to 3 months after we make the final selection.
Teresa, to that end, do you know approximately how many lots? I think there were 60 some in that group, and how many you have had proposals on?
So there were 60 some, that is correct. And then we had about 25 applicants, I believe, seeking lots. One of the things that has taken us a bit longer to get through the process is trying to figure out which builders are asking for the same lots. So there were a lot of duplicative requests in there. But I would say, given the amount of lots that have been asked for, it'll be close to that 60. We just have to figure out which ones are the more desirable lots.
Any other questions by commissioners? All right, then we'll go to city manager. This will be from our deputy city manager, Sean Strauss.
Good morning, everyone. Under the city manager's section, we have 4 items for presentation. The first item is regarding a reimbursable agreement with the Federal Aviation Administration supporting the upgrade of the instrument landing system at Lakeland Linder International Airport to a Category 3 designation. The Florida Department of Transportation issued a multi-year grant in June 2019 to upgrade the Runway 9 instrument landing system and runway visual range from a Category 2 to a Category 3 designation with an 80% participation of the project costs, with funds to be provided through 2024. So the grant is 80% funding from FDOT and 20% funding from the city. Lakeland Linder International Airport is in receipt of the Federal Aviation Administration's reimbursable agreement to provide engineering, design, review, and construction oversight for our airport's efforts to establish an approach lighting system with flashers to support Category 2 and 3 capabilities on Runway 9. This effort includes the sponsor, which is the city. It includes the city's installation of the system and the removal of the existing medium intensity approach lighting system, as well as the relocation of the Runway 9 glide slope and precision approach path indicator. The estimated cost of the FAA's services is $1,048,222, which is required to be prepaid in full at time of execution of the agreement. This is a critical component of upgrading to the Category 3 system and is eligible for reimbursement under the FDOT's 80% grant agreement. It is recommended that the City Commission authorize the appropriate city officials to enter into the reimbursable agreement with the FAA in the amount of $1,048,222.48 and to remit payment to the FAA for the contracted amount. So this is the city utilizing the FDOT grant to pay the FAA for engineering, design, review, and construction oversight of the project. No appropriations are needed for this item. And I know Mr. Conrad has joined us if there are any questions for staff.
All right, questions or any additional comments from Mr. Conrad first?
No, sir.
And any questions by commissioners? This is something I think we are all excited about seeing happen, and you have kept us surprised as we've gone forward, and it doesn't require any additional appropriations. So seems good to go. B.
Item is regarding a professional services contract with Robinson Aviation to provide air traffic controller services from 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. at Lakeland Leonard International Airport. The Category 2 ILS system requires that the air traffic control tower be manned when the system is available to be used. To meet this requirement, the airport will be initiating a 24-hour, 7-day-a-week manned tower operation beginning August 1st, 2020. The airport is obligated to cover the cost for the tower coverage during this extended time period, while the Federal Aviation Administration continues to pay for the current tower coverage, which is from 6 a.m. to 10 p.m. Robinson Aviation is the current contracted tower provider with the FAA, and the airport has negotiated with Robinson Aviation to also provide the controller service from the 10 p.m. to 6 p.m. extended coverage period. Now, because Robinson is the current provider from 6 a.m. 10 p.m., continuity of services for safety purposes is needed during these extended hours, so this would be a sole source authorization. The contract is for a 1-year period from August 1st, 2020 through July 31st, 2021. Upon mutual written agreement of both parties, this agreement may also be extended for 3 additional 1-year periods, and if this agreement is extended, each additional 1-year period is subject to increased cost at that time. Under the proposed contract agreement, the cost to provide the controller services for the first contract year is $258,995, and it would include the following costs. The airport would be responsible for a one-time charge of $7,643.68 for training costs for the new controllers. The airport will also remit a monthly fee of $19,109 to cover the controller cost for that extended 10 p.m. through 6 a.m. hours. The airport is also required to reimburse Robinson for its additional insurance cost of $22,044 on their aviation's operation liability insurance premium due to the increased hours of operations. These costs have already been included in the airport's 2020 and 21 budgets. It is recommended that the City Commission authorize the appropriate city officials to enter into the contract with Robinson Aviation to provide the air traffic controller services for the extended hours of 10 p.m. through 6 a.m., 7 days a week, and in the amount of $258,995.68, and there are no appropriations needed for this item. Again, staff will stand for any questions.
Franklin, did you have a question on this?
Gene, question for you on just the overnight operations. Is it pretty typical for the FAA to not cover the tab for the overnight operations?
Well, it's a great question. So as a contract tower, there is the ability for us, for the FAA to cover these costs. But when we initially looked into this, the FAA requirement for contract towers, you have to have 4 operations an hour for each one of those hours that the tower would be open. So I would tell you, they looked at it, they pulled flight data, obviously from Tampa Approach and FlightAware and other places, and we didn't hit that threshold. I'll be honest with you, right now we extend the tower hours already for NOAA. We've already done that several times actually in the last couple of weeks because they require the coverage as well. But the fact that the tower will be open 24/7, I would, and then flight schools, for example, on the East Coast or West Coast knows that. They may start coming over here to do touch and goes and stuff like that. So my goal would be that we hit those thresholds and we get the FAA to pick it up in the long term. But for right now, because of the instrument landing system, whether it's the Cat 2 or the Cat 3, we need to have the tower manned in order to operate and use that system.
Yeah, that's what I was wondering. I was wondering if this is kind of a chicken or the egg, because once we do have it in place, it's going to make us a much more attractive destination for people coming in during the overnight hours. So there is that threshold, and once we can demonstrate consistently we're over those 4 per hour, this ought to be completely free to us, right?
And I think, yes, sir, and I think it's a 90-day period. We may incentivize our flight schools to fly at night so we can hit those thresholds, because this is, it's a big price tag. But I believe over time we're going to be able to whittle away at this as far as the numbers and the operations, and get the FAA to take this over full time.
So does general aviation count in that too, or does it all have to be a certain size aircraft?
It all counts. It all counts. General aviation and everything.
If I can line up a number of my buddies, we can all decide, periodically to shoot middle of the night approaches.
Yes, sir. Please, for experience purposes.
We can take care of that.
Amazon, do they have any plans to have night landings?
Yes, there will be some night landings. I believe we'll have one night landing starting August 20th, is my understanding. So there will be some for Amazon as well.
And what is their timing on beginning the operation at this point, do you think?
July 23rd.
Okay, great. Any other questions for commissioners? Or by commissioners? All right, let's look at item number C.
Thank you again, Mr. Mayor. The third item is regarding task authorization with American Acquisitions Group for right-of-way acquisition services for the proposed South Wabash Avenue project. The South Wabash Avenue project will extend Wabash Avenue from Ariana Street to Hardin Boulevard. The construction plans are complete. The Army Corps of Engineers permits have been approved, and permits with the Florida Department of Transportation and the Southwest Florida Water Management District are under final review. The required mitigation credits for this project have also been purchased. Purchase of the right-of-way is required for this project, and 17 parcels have been identified. American Acquisition Group, which is one of the city's continuing contract firms, will provide services for title work, appraisal services, appraisal review, negotiation services, and overall project administration as part of this arrangement. City staff has negotiated a not-to-exceed fee of $402,392 for these services. In 2019, the City Commission approved a budget of $2,500,000 for the right-of-way phase of this project. Only $500,000 was included with the budget approved for FY20. It is now requested that the City Commission approve the appropriation of the remaining $2 million. Finance will administer an internal loan that will be paid back by transportation impact fee revenues. It is recommended that the City Commission authorize the appropriate city officials to execute a task authorization with American Acquisitions Group in the amount of $402,392 and authorize and increase the estimated revenues of $2 million along with a corresponding appropriation of $2 million plus interest and principal in the amount of $84,058 in the transportation fund. And we do have staff available on this call to answer any questions.
We appreciate your work on this so much. So I see Commissioner Reed and then Commissioner Walker.
Greg, good morning. Is it normal to pay about 20% to do the acquisitions of this magnitude?
Well, it's dependent upon. Can y'all hear me?
I hear you good.
Okay, it's dependent. Okay, it's usually dependent upon the size of the project and the complexity of the properties involved. We will at times have to bring in, as you can see in our form, that we have an engineering expert, a planner that look at the impacts of the property and assist the appraiser in reviewing those. So no, it's not uncommon. I can point back to probably our North Wabash Avenue extension project, where we had a similar fee, as well as when we did the Edgewood extension quite a few years ago.
So this is a not to exceed contract?
It is.
Thank you.
Commissioner Walker, yes, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. James, try to make sure I can put this into perspective because I know this is part of many years of talking and sharing and working toward this particular project, as we call it, the Wabash extension. And we know, of course, as I believe you shared with me just a few days ago, the North Wabash segment between Fairbanks up to West 10th Street is pretty much about to wrap up, I believe you said, moving toward construction and that kind of thing. Am I talking off base here?
No, you are correct. We have completed right-of-way acquisition, and we are getting ready to advertise for construction bids on July 15 for the North Wabash. And then actually today we began advertising for bids for the US 92 at Wabash intersection project.
Okay. Now, moving forward, as far as this particular reference agenda item from Ariana down to Hardin, now, what about the piece between? Is that county kind of related? I'm trying to make sure I put it all in perspective.
I'm not sure which piece you're referring to.
As you're heading south from the north part of our town, city, excuse me, and we're still heading on Wabash, am I thinking incorrect by you saying from Ariana going south to Hardin? What about north of Ariana?
Okay, I got you. Right, between Ariana and Olive, the county is looking at a potential project. They're looking at the drainage as well as potential widening and I believe sidewalks through that corridor as well. So that's all under review by the county. They haven't, as far as I know, they haven't initiated anything beyond doing a review of the corridor at this point.
Okay, I just want to make sure I was thinking correct. And I see Mr. Bombi is on him waving or putting his hand up, so maybe it can be an explanation because I was trying to make sure we had all this aligned properly from north to south, as we've been talking about for a number of years now.
Mr. Bombi.
Oh, thank you. As Mr. James mentioned, the county, they've got a project right now that's funded through DOT to make complete street improvements on the section from just south of Olive down to Ariana Street. I think it's programmed in 2022, but it would include sidewalks, a bike trail, transit stop amenities, and basically a reconstruction of the corridor. It was funded through DOT a couple of years ago, but the cost on that is about $2 million and would tie in with this project. And so I know in terms of concept, they've seen the concept plans and the design plans for the South Wabash extension and would be tying into that at Ariana Street. And then it would tie into the Ariana sidewalk, which is also scheduled for construction within the next year or so.
All right, Commissioner Reed.
Is it fair to say we have most of the right-of-way from Hardin Boulevard to north of Oak Bridge?
No, we have from Hardin to the Turnpike overpass. We're working that out with Turnpike Authority and DOT. So yeah, we're okay there. There's a little bit of additional right-of-way that we're talking with the Department of Transportation on right now at the intersection. And basically our acquisition will begin north of the Parkway overpass all the way to Ariana, and most of that falls into the CSX side of the alignment.
Where does it tie in specifically in Lakeside Village?
When you come in, if you head north from Hardin, you'll take Beaker Boulevard, which we'll reconstruct. We'll go underneath the overpass, and then there will be a new alignment for the CSX entrance to their rail yard, as well as we'll realign the access road north of the overpass directly to Lakeside Village. And then north of Lakeside Village, you'll have another access point just south of the new residential development there on the north side of Lakeside Village.
So 2 points of access to Wabash at that point. That's great.
Yes.
Commissioner McLeod.
Thank you. Was that always the plan to fund the $2 million through an internal loan?
Yes. Yeah, we had, in talking with finance, the best approach was to use our transportation impact fees and then to finance this part through it, because we have, we don't have just, the 2.5 we didn't have just available in that impact fee district. So the best way to do it was through an internal loan with impact fee revenue repaying that.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, that's helpful. Since I wasn't part of that in 2019, I was just curious if that was always the plan, but that makes sense. Thank you.
And that is the typical format we do when we know we can have the impact opportunity. Commissioner Mann.
Thank you, Mayor. Also, when you're talking about access points, isn't Grasslands Boulevard going to be an access point for Grasslands?
Yes.
I had actually just referred the question only to Lakeside Village. That's why I answered that way. Yes. And so that's north of that. Any other questions? Obviously, there's a lot of interest in Wabash. I don't think most of our citizens realize how important that north-south corridor will become once it is fluid. And it makes a big difference in the way you can get around on the west side. So it's going to be terrific. Thank you for your work on that. All right, so no other questions on that. We will move to item D. You're still muted, sir.
I'm sorry.
You're a little soft, or at least to me.
Okay. Can you hear me okay? Okay. This next item is very scientific, so I'm going to try to omit as much of the scientific language as I can from the presentation and spare you the complexity. The next item is regarding a task authorization with Wood Environment and Infrastructure for Lake Hollingsworth's Total Maximum Daily Load, or TMDL Phase 2 Feasibility Study. Lake Hollingsworth does not currently meet Florida Department of Environmental Protection surface water quality numeric nutrient criteria. Lake Hollingsworth is a TMDL impaired water body that requires a pollutant load reduction implementation plan for submittal to the FDEP in accordance with the previously submitted and approved City of Lakeland TMDL prioritization plan. The city's Lakes and Stormwater Division requested a scope of services from Wood Environment and Infrastructure Solutions to assist the city in complying with its municipal separate storm sewer system National Pollutant Discharge Elimination System permit requirements pertaining to reductions needed for Lake Hollingsworth. In February 2020, Wood completed a Phase 1 TMDL assessment for the city, and now the proposed Phase 2 evaluation and feasibility study will be a continuation of that Phase 1 study and will include a groundwater seepage study, an algae community assessment, a sediment thickness survey and bathymetric survey of the lake bottom, and an evaluation of internal nutrient cycling into the water column and sediment management feasibility assessments. Funding for the Lake Hollingsworth TMDL Phase 2 feasibility study is provided in the FY20 Stormwater Utility CIP. It is recommended that the City Commission authorize the appropriate city officials to execute the task authorization with Wood Environment and Infrastructure Services on behalf of the City of Lakeland in the amount not to exceed $149,983.70. And Lori is available for any questions.
Lori, please use your expertise to just tell us in layman's terms why this is important.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is Lori Smith, Manager of Lakes and Stormwater. Lake Hollingsworth, as it said, is in our TMDL program, meaning that the lake is impaired. We have a plan that's been submitted and approved by DEP to manage all of our TMDL lakes. It's been 20 years since any restoration work was done extensively in the lake, and that was the dredging project that was completed in the late 1990s. After that, we did a lot of work to address stormwater inputs, including the stormwater treatment pond that was constructed at the north side of the lake, just south of Florida Southern College. And we have 11 pollution control devices at the end of stormwater pipes, the outfall into the lake. So as the phase 1 study showed us, which wasn't surprising, the issues with Lake Hollingsworth is no longer really a stormwater input issue. It's more related to nutrients already within the lake. So we need to do this further assessment to pinpoint exactly where those nutrients are coming from. Is it a groundwater issue, or is groundwater even contributing? Because there are historic septic areas in the vicinity of the lake that could potentially be contributing nutrients. We need to look at the sediment. Most likely, the sediment that wasn't removed during the dredging and additional sediment that's settled in the lake since then are probably recycling nutrients back into the lake. So those are the two major components. There's also certain algae types that convert atmospheric nitrogen into nitrogen in the surface water column that could also be contributing nutrients. So that's why we're also doing the algae. So this phase 2 approach will give us a better idea of exactly what we need to do to continue our work on Lake Hollingsworth to completely restore that lake. So we've come a long way, reduced a lot of the nutrient source in the stormwater, but we need to now address the lake.
So Lori, the remediation tools that are available include what kinds of things as after the study would be complete?
There's a couple of things that we're looking at, and one would be a sediment amendment, something along the lines of what was done back 20 years ago where they did an alum treatment. And since then, the technology has really been improved. And there's other types of treatments that work pretty much the same way. You add it to the water column and it suppresses the nutrients in the lake and sequesters them in the sediment. So it's a lot less expensive than trying to do another dredging type project. So that's probably the way we're going to go. And I would say that would be probably the most feasible. But again, they'll need to look at all of the potential sources to really determine what the actual remediation will be.
And are we using, are the plants that are in the lake the ones that reduce the most amount of nitrogen currently, or are there some different plants that could be used?
And that's also something that will be looked at. Yes, it's interesting. The native plants in the lake definitely are the ones that want to encourage. There's still a lot of invasive species in that lake, which the county and us have been managing mostly through spraying, but we did receive our aquatic harvester last week, so we will be putting that to work, hopefully very soon, to help us remove the invasive species in that lake, which will definitely contribute to water quality improvement.
That's great news. By the way, does the aquatic harvester have any capacity to float, or is it all on wheels in the lake?
It floats, just like a boat. Yep.
Great. That's interesting. Okay. Any other questions? Since I've taken us on a real sidetrack with mine. Thank you very much. And if there are none, we appreciate the report from our Deputy City Manager, and we will move to City Attorney on ordinances first reading 1.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. One ordinance for first reading related to a change in zoning from O1 and I1 opposite industrial zoning to a PUD for property at, it's about a 3.5 acre site at 2050 Edgewood Drive South. Teresa, you want to show some slides?
Do you see my screen? Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, we can see your screen, sorry.
Great. All right, so this property is located south of East Edgewood Drive and north of South Edgewood Drive. It is an approximately 3.4 acre parcel that's irregularly shaped. It is unique in that it has both split future land use and split zoning. So the westernmost portion of the site has a residential high future land use designation and a zoning designation that allows for office uses, while the eastern portion of the site has business park future land use and has industrial zoning. On the western portion of the site, there is an existing structure that is approximately 8,400 square feet. It's a multi-tenant office building. The applicant owner originally came to us seeking a change in zoning for the westernmost portion of the site to industrial to allow for greater flexibility in his marketing of the units. He has had some difficulty in attracting tenants to fill all of the units in that office building. This is a photograph of the office building from the front. This is along the northernmost property boundary, adjacent to the buildings that face East Edgewood Drive. This here shows you a little more clearly how that split zoning looks. It is, the majority of the property does have the industrial zoning, and everything surrounding it to both the north and the east also has industrial zoning, while everything to the west has office zoning. So it was logical to the owner that you would extend the industrial zoning over to what is shown in pink. However, as we got into the public hearing at the Planning and Zoning Board back in January, there were a number of surrounding property owners and businesses that came out concerned about the extension of industrial into what they believe is more of an office type setting. There were also some comments made about lack of maintenance on the property and concerns that they had with some past uses that were occurring that weren't consistent with the zoning, and that includes automotive repair uses. So following that hearing, the staff met with the property owner several times, and he did resubmit his application for planned unit development zoning with the request to allow some additional retail uses, small-scale retail uses, and light industrial uses with conditions on that portion of the property that has the office zoning. This aerial here shows you some of the site characteristics that were of concern to the surrounding property owners. There was some storage of some cars and also some trailers on the site. There's also a stormwater pond or ditch in this area that some of the surrounding property owners have claimed is not maintained. It's really just a matter of, I think, the nature of that drainage system there and some of the plants that grow in it. So there are no outstanding code enforcement cases on this property. There had been in the past, but those have all been resolved. And this is just a shot of that drainage system along the road. So looking at a recommendation for planned unit development, we broke the parcel down into two tracks, A and B, with B allowing all of those industrial uses that would have been allowed by right under the existing I-1 zoning, but adding in some performance standards related to outdoor storage, noise, and other environmental impacts. The track that's now labeled as A would be where there would be greater flexibility for some commercial uses, and the conditions list those out, and then also some light industrial uses. So again, nothing too heavy, these are uses that typically could incur indoors to discourage any type of outdoor storage or external impacts to the surrounding property owners. Despite the changes in the PUD, I will say that there were still some surrounding property owners objecting to the uses being proposed. However, we believe that with the conditions that are recommended, that there will be limited impacts to surrounding property owners. And I'm available for any questions. Mayor, I think you're muted. I saw you speaking.
Sorry, question from Commissioner Walker.
Ms. Teresa, just want to make sure, because as you're showing it on the screen and as looking through the agenda item that we have before us. And knowing the property of the adjacent businesses to this particular piece that we're asking to be changed, of course, in zoning. If I hear you correct, you, as far as staff is concerned, even though we still have some, I guess, tenants or those businesses that maybe abut this particular piece, you all believe that things have, because of what you have in place, would not cause any disruption or any kind of challenge for businesses that are there already?
We believe that as long as the property owner proceeds in a manner that's consistent with the conditions, there should not be any problems. I think there has been some strained relationships in the past between this owner and some of the surrounding property owners. But again, with allowing some greater flexibility, perhaps you can get some tenants in that office building and not have to rely on some of the activities that were happening, he claims, without his knowledge, like the auto repair business. So we're hoping this will allow him to get in some tenants and then have conditions that he can then perhaps even develop the property that's to the east that has the industrial zoning.
And as far as the code violations that you did mention that were there on this property, I would hate to assume anything, but it was during the time of his ownership that those code enforcement were placed?
Yes, it was. And they were of the nature of overgrowth, storage of trailers, but each time there was a violation, he did come into compliance.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Any other questions by commissioners? Commissioner McCarley.
Thank you, Mayor. So Teresa, with these code violations and the conditions that we've asked to work with them, what is the framework that you bring?
I'm sorry, Commissioner, I didn't hear what you said. There was
a little closer to the mic, Commissioner.
Oh, sorry, I had to take my AirPods out. I said with regard to his former, code enforcement issues and then the conditions that you've mapped out for him and staff, what happens if the conditions aren't met?
If the conditions aren't met, then it becomes code violation and there would have to be code action taken through our code enforcement office.
And how long does that usually take? So if the surrounding areas have an issue with it, what does the timeline look like in that regard?
It's dependent upon how soon or how quickly the owner comes into compliance. So in the most recent cases that I looked through, I would say it was probably several months in this particular case for compliance to occur. And that was as, violations are issued, a violation notice is issued, and then there's re-inspections by the code enforcement officers. So it was about a 2 to 3 month time frame before compliance was achieved in the past.
And I would just caution the commission that I've got some experience with this, actually, not with this particular property, but in a prior case where someone was seeking a rezoning, and it was actually the county commission denied the rezoning based on the code enforcement history of the property, and the court overturned the county commission on that. Saying that with a zoning action, you're looking at the comprehensive plan and compatibility of the proposed zoning with adjacent uses. The code enforcement issues do not come directly into play with that. That's something that's handled through a code enforcement process, not a zoning action. So I would prefer that you give focus on compatibility issues aside from code enforcement issues, and the code enforcement issues are dealt with through the process we have set up for that.
So our responsibility is to look at this just strictly on a zoning basis and compatibility.
Correct.
Okay, Commissioner Madden.
So with regard to compatibility, this is right across from the Cypress Park fields and then right down the street from South McKeel Academy, right?
That's correct, yes.
Okay, so I just want to make sure that I was kind of placing it on the right point. Do we have any concerns with zoning with regard to being next to the school or across from the park?
No, we didn't receive any comments from either of those two entities, either from our own Parks and Recreation or from the school. And, you know, when you look at this area, and you can see it some here in this image that's up, some of the other storage issues that are occurring. If I can get back up to the aerial. You know, given the time frame within which this area was developed originally, and the fact that it was originally in the county and then annexed into the city, that's why we have this kind of mix of zoning designations in the area, because we were attempting at the time to deal with what had already been developed and then make it conforming with our own zoning code. So that's why when you drive down the segment of Edgewood, you see the mix of retail, and then gradually it transitions to more industrial type looking uses. But it's really a mix. You have a gymnastic studio, you know, next to a flooring company. So it's a real mix of uses. Most of it, at least from street view, you don't see a lot of the storage impacts that occur in the rear of the buildings. So that's why we wanted to heavily condition this to make sure that those aesthetics are maintained along South Edgewood as they are along East Edgewood.
Mr. McLeod.
I think you answered my question, Teresa. I was just curious about the history of the split zoning on the parcel and trying to figure out why that was, and if that's just, if it's irrelevant today. But I think you answered that.
Yeah, it goes back to the early 90s.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Commissioner Reed. You're mute still, Commissioner Reed. I apologize. Now, could this be your headphone? Now try it.
We're not hearing you.
We're not hearing you, sir. Would you like to come into my office? Because we're not far away. Just run over here really fast. Seriously. I'll just jump up from my desk. You can ask the question.
Where are you? Oh, right here. Okay. Good morning. This is a big desk. I tell you, this is a privilege to be here. Teresa, you indicated at the hearing the surrounding neighbors had compatible issues. Is that your feeling as well? There again, I know we can't use a zoning denial or postponement because of what Palmer just indicated due to the code enforcement issue. But, and I empathize with the property owner as well for not being able to lease the building because of the building as such. But I'd like your personal thoughts so I can make a better determination as to what your compatibility issue might be.
I think there was probably some uncertainty, or maybe it wasn't clear to the property owner where the limits of the uses were, so where the I-1 stopped and where the office began, and that may have been part of the problem in the past when he was having some other tenants in there that were doing things beyond what the zoning allowed. So this, if approved, would make that more clear as to what uses are and are not allowed, and also set very clear standards. I can't guarantee, of course, that he will meet all of those, but we do have one condition in particular that's been put in place and that's recommended, and that's the very last condition that points out that if there are repeat occurrences of code violations or Lakeland Police Department registered incident reports, that could be a basis for the City Commission repealing the planned unit development zoning.
All right. Well, he did hear your answer. That I know, because he could hear in his earphone. So we'll work on that. Commissioner Walker.
I'm not knowing whether this be relevant, but but maybe Mr. Teresa can refer to because or reference it because I know we've had and correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Teresa, but we've had a similar situation in the past where we've had to when zoning changes have come about, and of course these kind of recommendations come forward because maybe there's been some code, and I'm trying to stay away from that as our city attorney has alluded to, but because we put those particular situations or into the actual change of, that's coming forward, if that particular owner does not do what needs to be done, we as a commission can come back and of course make the corrections and withdraw the actual situation that has been proposed. Am I saying it right, Ms. Teresa?
So in this case, the commission could take the action of repealing the zoning approval, yes, if you found that there were the number of incidents being met that are outlined in the conditions.
I would just add, I would think that would need to be related directly to conditions of the zoning as opposed to just miscellaneous code violations for you to proceed on that basis.
Yeah, he's wanting us to keep on the zoning decision
exactly.
and not on how it's enforced.
Exactly.
Mr. Reed, let's see if we were. I can't hear him. If you have another question, sir, we could certainly switch places. All right. If Commissioner Reed doesn't have another question, are there any other questions by commissioners? All right. Thank you, Teresa, for that recap, and we will go on to the next item, which is resolution. Lots and clearing.
Yeah, the next resolution is simply following up on the equalization here. It's just formalizing the assessments against the different laws for lots cleaning and clearing. Next item is an agreement with Allied Security Services. That's our current security vendor. I believe Ramona will present this item.
Yes, this is a new agreement with Allied for a new 3-year term with 2 additional 1-year options of renewal. They serve, the contractor has served previously and provided security guard services for a variety of city facilities as the McIntosh Power Plant, City Hall, Lakeland Administrative Building, the water treatment plants, and central storage. This is being procured through a state contract. Again, it's a 3-year term. For the initial 3-year term, the total cost is $4,077,594.69. And this is included in the various departmental budgets of Lakeland Electric, Public Works, and the Water Utilities Department.
All right, questions by commissioners. Commissioner Reed, who now it's going to work. It's magical.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
All right, good. Thank you. Test. I'm done.
Okay, and any other questions by commissioners? All right, next.
The next item is a second modification to the agreement with Wharton Smith for the T.B. Williams Water Treatment Plant Clearwell project. You heard about that a couple of months ago. We brought you the first modification to that agreement, which established the guaranteed maximum price to be paid to the construction manager for that project for the replacement of the Clearwell there. And that guaranteed maximum price was $17,301,000. Since that time, as the project has developed, Water Utilities has identified the opportunity to do direct purchase of a number of materials for this project. Actually, they will be directly purchasing $4,546,404 directly, and the benefit of that is that the city is exempt from sales tax. So we will actually realize a sales tax savings for this project of $273,184. But for the present purposes, what we need to do is reduce the guaranteed maximum price to be paid to the construction manager by the amount that the city is actually going to directly purchase. So we're going to reduce that amount by $4,546,000. The guaranteed maximum price will go from $17,301,000 164 to 12,754,759. The tax savings of $273,000 will just remain in the project for now in case we need it, but it will not go towards the contractor unless we come back to you with an additional modification to the agreement. So good approach.
Good approach. Any questions on this one? All right, let's go to the third.
The next item is following up on the earlier item you heard about, the CDBG and home action plans. This is just specifying the various different nonprofit agencies that receive funding from these two sources. And once again, I believe we'll have a presentation on this by Annie on Monday, and Teresa is here. If you have any questions, I think you heard most of that earlier, though.
Are there any other questions than we talked about earlier on that? This will be Annie's presentation. Seeing none, no report from the finance director, and we've done the other two items in utility. So that is it with respect to this meeting. We will we can adjourn unless you would like to do some other discussion first this morning, and then we have our commission meeting at 10. So Commissioner Madden.
Thank you, Mayor. I did want to just get an update on the broadband. I feel like, there's so much going on right now, with our community conversation with regard to racial equity and with the current COVID spikes. I just don't want to lose track of where we are on that broadband proposal and when we're coming together to discuss those.
City Manager Delgado will give us an update, and he has been keeping that on the burner. It's just not been on the front one with us.
Yeah, if you recall, last week I did send you an email. That email to let you know that we received 8 proposals regarding the broadband initiative. We sent you a list of those who have applied, though we have not sent you the proposal. I also sent a template that we normally use as part of our procurement process in an RFP. That template would create a scoring system. What we're waiting to do is, find out from you all if that template is reasonable or if there are changes to that template. Once we have that from you, and I'll send another email this weekend so I can go ahead and reiterate some of that process with the template. If you feel comfortable with that template, we can send you the proposals ASAP, and then we can schedule a meeting sometime in the next couple of weeks to allow you to go through those proposals and start discussing the process, because you are the selection committee. The city staff is not the selection committee. You are the selection committee. And so you'll have to go through each one of those 8 proposals based upon the scoring system criteria if you feel comfortable with that. But you're right, Commissioner Madden, there's so many things going on. It's been very dynamic here recently in the landscape of everything else that email might have gotten a little lost. I will send it again so that you can take a look at that template. If you feel comfortable with that scoring matrix, we can get you those proposals.
Commissioner Walker.
Yes, but before we dismiss here and get ready for our 10 o'clock special call meeting, Mr. Mayor, I again would like to just say thank you to yourself and my colleagues and the senior staff and all the staff, of course, that played a part into Monday night's forum. I've been hearing from different ones around our city where they felt that there was a good approach by us as a city to do something like that. I guess, well, I don't guess, I know that a number of folks say this was first of its kind and sometime to where we had an open kind of a listening kind of a session from those that want to come and share as they did on Monday evening. So again, I want to tell you all thank you for even allowing it, and we're coming together to bring that about. But certainly, I know we need to move forward, and time would, I'm sure, would be of essence as we move forward in some respect, and maybe give some thought to maybe how we can have that kind of a dialogue among each other here in some of the next few days, maybe as we get past holiday time, and in the next week or so. We can probably have some kind of a come together as a meeting to say, hey, how best we move forward to help support the actual subject matter at hand. Again, thank you though, but for allowing it to come about. And I think it was very much appreciated by those comments I received since Monday evening.
I appreciate your comment on that. I'm coalescing some of the notes from that meeting into kind of actionable items and areas that Tracy will give to you all when I get that done. And that will give us the format to work on some of those things and to triage what we ought to take a look at first. I think it might be healthy for us in the next 60 days or so to have a, depending on timing and how everything breaks with summer and everything else that's going on, a second meeting like that, because I know we could have at that point in time some action items that we're working on and some things that might, where they're tiered in terms of our responses, as well as learning some other things that can take place. It was a night that probably was underattended to some degree for people, both because of concerns about being an RP funding center and what that was going to be like. And as well as social distancing, but I think we went long by maybe 40 minutes or so, and that was because we wanted to listen well. So I applaud all of you for your concern, because it really was very moving to me just to watch your faces in terms of the earnestness and the hearts of hearing those people. So great. I think it's a good move forward, but it is, when it's not lip service, we have to make it real. And Mr. Mustard has a point he'd like to bring up.
I understand that Kevin's internet connection is going off and on. I just wanted to remind everyone that the commission meeting will be on this same GoToMeeting link.
Okay, great. And so when we're done sharing here, we'll take a break and then come back together at about 9:55.
Mr. Mayor,
yes.
Mr. Mayor, if I could, I forgot it. It was my slip again. I thank Ms. Tracy for helping me remind myself and remind you all. I will not be here next week. I'm on vacation, so I will not be in the meeting on Monday as it's scheduled to be. So I'll be gone for the next probably 8 days, starting Monday. Thank you.
We hope you have an enjoyable time, sir, and we will miss you. Kevin, I see you're back.
Yeah, yes, before we get off, want to remind everyone, as Mike said, my internet's going in and out, and I'm going to do my very best to handle the callers. I've got the system locked now. I'm going to unlock it to let callers start coming in, but it's very important that we try to identify Dr. Joy Jackson, who's going to call in, I understand. So please bear with us at the very beginning of the meeting as I try to roll through the callers to see if we can identify Dr. Jackson. That's it. Thank you.
All right. And she will not be able to Zoom in with a computer connection?
My understanding, she's going to call in.
Okay. That's fine.
But I could be wrong, but that was my understanding.
All right. And so any other comments by commissioners?
Mr. Delgado.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to alert the commission that as of 2 days ago, our temporary emergency order to allow for expanding outdoor dining and retail activity expired. I assume that you wanted me to continue moving that forward, so I extended it for another month. Hopefully none of you have a problem with that.
I don't see any problematic heads. So if we do, we could bring that up in our meeting as well.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Yeah. Okay, hearing none, we'll see you in just a bit. Thanks.